Stress can be defined as a condition or circumstance that threatens one's well-being or forces them to deviate from their normal functioning. Stress also comes in many different forms. Stress can be caused due to everyday events like bad weather, illness, bill payments, money issues, or major events in one's life like divorce, transfer, etc. An example of this is stress caused by assignment and project work. Stress may also be embedded in the environment. There are many kinds of stress which comes due to environmental circumstances which an individual share with others. One such example is environment condition like excessive noise, heat and pollution which might negatively affect an individual day-to-day life and give rise to stress. Many people think that most of the stress are imposed on them by others, but studies have found out that most of the time people impose stress on themselves. For example, people sign up for extra classes to get through school quickly. Some even take on extra responsibilities to impress their peers and boss. Sometimes stress culture also influences stress and might be caused due to increased modernization and urbanization or shift in values or customs. Stress also lies in the eye of beholder. Sometimes stress comes out as a choice, and one can decide to take it while others might decide to ignore them. This nature of stress can further be explained using primary appraisal and secondary appraisal. Primary appraisal is an initial evaluation of whether an event is either completely irrelevant or is relevant but not that threatening or attention worthy. When a person views an event as impact worthy, then that comes under secondary appraisal, in which someone evaluates the coping resources and options to deal with the stress. For example, let's take an individual who is going to appear for an interview as an example. If that person is desperate for the job, then he might experience stress. But if that person is not desperate and is just giving the interview for experience, then he might not even feel a bit of stress or any pressure.
Now let's see the potential effects of stress. People struggling with many stresses every day, most of which come and go without leaving any enduring imprint. However, when stress is severe or when demand piles up, stress may have long lasting effects. These effects, often called adaptational outcomes, are relatively durable consequences of exposure to stress. Although stress can have beneficial effects, research has focused mainly on possible negative outcomes, so you will find our coverage slanted in that direction. Now, potential effects of stress. A person with stress tends to be nervous and might not be able to completely focus on the task assigned to him. Next, disruption of cognitive functioning. A person with huge amount of stress loses his ability to think maturely and takes rash decisions which could hamper him or others. Next is burnout. A person with stress tends to be feel fatigued and is most likely not be able to give his 100%. Stress also leads to post-traumatic stress disorder where the individual is feeling fear when the stress is encountered. Person with stress have poor mental state and in turn also leads to physical illness. Psychological problems and disorder happens and a person builds up a bad relationship with his her colleague or family and friends. Coping with stress. Coping refers to the efforts to master, reduce, or tolerate the demands created by stress. People cope up with stress in many ways. Coping, constructive coping refers to the efforts to deal with stressful events that are just to be relatively helpful. The concept of constructive coping is simply meant to convey a healthy, positive connotation without promising success.
Hello, my name is Satyajit, and I'm going to talk about appraisal focused coping. Now, coping is a method of dealing with stress. Appraisal focused coping is based on this idea that we feel as we think, which means our perception of an event and our preconceived notions decide if we actually are going to find that event stressful or not. A useful way to deal with stress is to alter our appraisal or perception of a threatening event. There is this common sense view that events directly lead to stress. But Albert Ellis, who founded the concept of Appraisal focused coping proposes that there is actually this layer of belief in between that decides our emotional response to a particular event. We often indulge in catastrophic thinking, overthink, and exaggerate the effects of an event. Instead, if we avoid this and think rationally and keep realistic expectations, we can avoid a lot of stress in life. Let us take an example. Let us say I invite a friend to hang out, but on that particular day, the friend doesn't turn up. So now I can think about this event in two ways. First, I can overthink, exaggerate, and catastrophically think that I am a very boring person, nobody likes me, and I'll always be lonely. But then I can also be realistic and take it for what it is and say that this particular person that I invited has not turned up, but there are other people that I can make friends with and hang out with, and I'll not always be lonely. This way, I have avoided a lot of unnecessary stress in life. Similarly, we have a lot of other unrealistic expectations in life. For example, the expectation that we must be liked by all people. Now, over time, I have realized that it is not very healthy to care about the approval of other people, and I try to be who I am and let people who naturally like me attract towards me. Another unrealistic expectation I had or still have is that I must perform well in all fields, which does not really happen because if I expect myself to perform well in everything, then I'll only be disappointed and deter myself from taking up new things. The next unrealistic expectation that I have is that strangers that I meet should always be kind and considerate towards me, which if you think about it is very ambitious because everybody is dealing with their own problems in life and you cannot always expect them to be considerate towards your feelings. And then one of the biggest unnecessary expectations I have is that things should go my way in life. But life doesn't work that way. Life has ups and downs, and I should learn to rise from my failures and move ahead in life. So this way, if we try and avoid some unrealistic expectations, think rationally, then we can short circuit our direct response to a stress inducing event and insert our belief system in between and try to think about such events in a rational and positive way and maybe reduce the stress that we would feel before. The purpose of appraisal focused coping is to change your perspective on stressful situations. Thus, it promotes humor as a stress reducer. Humor acts as a cushion that dampens the effects of stress. You must have noticed that when someone we know is under stress, we try to relax them by making jokes or trying some other kind of humor. For me personally, I like to resort to sitcoms and listen to other humorous shows at the end of a very stressful day. Now, there are several reasons why humor helps to produce positive emotions in stress, like it gives a less threatening appraisal of stressful events. It increases positive emotions because we are feeling happy when we are laughing at jokes. Also, you must have noticed people with good sense of humor have good social relations. So when they are in any kind of stress, they get a great amount of social support. And then people with a great sense of humor are also more likely to take themselves less seriously. So when someone insults them or someone says something about them, they are less likely to get affected by that person. Now, along with humor, another coping mechanism suggested by appraisal focused coping is positive reinterpretation. Here, we are basically trying to think of how things could have been much worse or how people have it much worse. Now, don't take it wrong, the goal here is not to feel good about other people's miseries, but to feel grateful about the current situation that you are in and how things could have gotten much worse, but they are not. So, being happy with what you have and where you are in life. Now let us look at a case study where humor acted as a coping mechanism. In 1992, there were these floods in the Chicago area of USA called the Great Chicago Floods. So basically, the rivers in the Chicago area overflowed and wrecked the houses of thousands and thousands of people. So naturally, media houses from all over the country flew to Chicago to interview the people who were affected by this natural disaster. Interestingly enough, a lot of the people that were interviewed were making jokes and making light of their situation and their misery while they were standing amongst the wreckage of their house. So, in this way, humor gives you a positive approach to move through life and overcome stress.
Hi, sir. This is Divyanu Daledi. I'm gonna explain about one more stress coping strategy, that is problem-focused constructive coping using systematic problem solving. In dealing all life's problems, the most obvious course of action is to tackle the problems head on. With this thought in mind, we will sketch a general outline of how to engage in more systematic problem solving. Firstly, we define the problem. Secondly, we generate new ideas. Thirdly, if we implement and evaluate the solutions. And lastly, we evaluate and select solutions. We clarify the problem, we generate alternative courses of action, we evaluate your alternatives and select a course of action. Take action while maintaining flexibility. Another thing we need should understand about constructive problem-focused constructive coping is not that we ourselves have to come up with a solution. We can seek help in trying to tackle problems directly. Please to keep in mind the value of seeking aid from friends, family, co-workers, and neighbors. And we need to understand the value of time, using time more effectively. Managing time effectively reduces the stress of piled up tasks. Also, one more important aspect in problem focused constructive coping is improving self control. Self discipline and self control are the key to handling many of life's problems effectively. Whether you are struggling with the frustration of poor grades in school, pressure to do well in sports, or downhill changes in finances that require readjustment, you will need reasonable self control if you expect to make such progress. Thank you.
Hi, this is Rishi Mungia, and I'm going to talk about another strategy to cope with stress, which is the emotional focused constructive coping strategy. In this strategy, we identify problems that are too serious to be whittled down by reprisal or problems that simply can't be solved. Moreover, even well executed coping strategies may take time to work before emotional tension begins to subside. Hence, it is helpful to be able to recognize and modulate one's emotions. Some examples of coping stress through this strategy are doing regular exercise, taking a bath, giving yourself a pep talk, or meditate. The emotion focused constructive coping strategy consists of the following: enhancing emotional intelligence. This is the key to being resilient in the face of stress. Releasing pent up emotions. In time of stress, seeking support from friends is a very useful coping strategy. Releasing pent-up emotions by talking about your difficulties is a particularly beneficial coping mechanism. Managing hostility and forgiving others. It is well known that hostility is related to increased risk for heart attacks and other types of illness, and just stress in general. Thus, managing hostility is key in coping stress. Meditating and using relaxation procedures. Meditation is a mental exercise in which conscious attempt is made to focus attention in a non-analytical way. This helps us reach a state of mind.